Hey everyone, this is Max at MaxCTCG. Thank you for joining me in another video. This is going to be a video I don't see taught a lot when teaching people basics. It doesn't necessarily pertain to just understanding the rules of the game, but it's a form of competitive thinking that you'll definitely have to use when getting into modern competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! But you can apply this to any form of the game. I'd just say that knowing it now in the modern game is integral. Where before it was more just like a extra thing that would be really helpful when playing more old school Yu-Gi-Oh! And what this is actually be able to understand important cards your opponent's playing. This will allow you to better knowledge of the game, make better reads, be able to counter the game at different stages while in a duel. So being able to learn this strategy and start developing it early on is something that you will carry on as you keep getting better and getting into the game more competitively. And if you decide you don't want to move forward with it competitively, just understanding this will really help you with just playing with your friends casually as well. So what we're going to do is just jump into the first section and talk about these important cards. So knowing the cards people are using in their strategies is an important part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Since it lets you make strategies that will play around the cards you think they'll be using. This applies in this Mock Duel and in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Example the cards of this Mock Duel below. So we're using the Mock Duel as a way of kind of restraining what you need to look at. Part of getting into modern competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Is learning what very popular and powerful decks are that people are going to be using. And the more knowledge you have about those strategies, how they work, where their choke points are, what cards they're playing, cards they might be citing, more you know about that strategy and how it works, the better of a chance you have of being able to play against it, because you won't make as many mistakes and you'll know what the cards do. One big advantage that a deck can have is if it's something that's not as popular, and that can give you an advantage even if that deck on paper is not as strong. So we're going to be using this mentality to jump into this Mock Duel deck and break down some of the cards so you can understand how to make better reads when practicing with it, and understand how the characters in the Mock Duel section are making these reads, and then being able to apply these as you keep learning. So you can break cards into different categories. One thing that can be important, think of these as kind of like game changer cards, or flow changing cards, things that can really turn the duel around. So these are cards that can change the flow of who's winning. So a couple of the cards here, we have our Change of Heart. Steals an opponent's monster to the end phase. Monster Reborn. Or summon a monster from either graveyard. And Raigeki, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. So these are great cards that if your opponent gets these, you could be in a winning situation, but still lose. So it's something to keep in mind when playing, thinking like, did they use these cards yet? Am I going to lose if they get these cards? So realizing this could be a reason to either play more conservatively or faster, based on if do they have any of these game changer cards. Right, so next we have standard spell and trap cards. So you have Swords Revealing Light, flip set monsters face up, and your opponent's monsters cannot attack for 3 turns. Dark Hole destroys all monsters on the field, and Trap Hole destroys a monster that is normal or flip summoned with 1,000 or more attack. So Swords Revealing Light is a really cool card, especially in the strategy kind of part of the game, because it does actually a couple of things that can be really helpful. So one, it could stall out the game, give you a chance to draw into your kind of game changer cards if that's what you need, or into a certain card that you think you might need to have against your opponent, just monster, getting some back row, protect your board, different things. The other thing that it does, which I think is underutilized, especially when you're newer to the game, is it flips face down monsters face up. Now this does a lot of things. One, it will take away the kind of guessing part of the game. If your opponent sets a monster, it's most likely a high position monster or a flip effect. So by flipping it face up, you'll know what it is. If it is a flip effect, you can make it waste its effect, or maybe not have the best target. If it's a man-eater bug, for example, that we'll get into in the next section, that monster, when flipped face up, targets a monster on the field. This has to happen. Not say you can, it's a mandatory effect. There's no optional wording in the effect. So the man-eater bug would actually have to target itself, destroying it. So that's a way for you to be able to not lose one of your monsters and take out one of theirs. So it can be a really strategic card in kind of these earlier states of the game. Next we have Dark Hole. It's similar to Raigeki, but this card destroys all monsters on the field. So going second, this is pretty much a second copy of Raigeki because you won't have any monsters, which is great. But if you're in a leading position, Dark Hole isn't going to do as much, where it could actually end up just hurting you. Where Raigeki is not going to hurt you because it's just your opponent's cards. So on paper, this card's a little bit better earlier on. In modern competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, there are cards that get effects by being destroyed. So Dark Hole can actually be a positive for you, or it can clear annoying monsters your opponent's trying to give you to be able to hurt you. So it can actually have some benefits in modern competitive Yu-Gi-Oh that Raigeki doesn't have. And then Trap Hole, that will be able to slow down your opponent's strategy and what they're trying to do. A really great way to be able to play around Dark Hole is actually using Monster Reborn, because Trap Hole only works as a way of getting rid of normal or flip summon monsters, or tribute summon as well. Monster Reborn will bring back a monster through a special summon, so Trap Hole can't actually get rid of it. So this is a great way of stealing a really monster that your opponent can't hit with a Trap Hole and end up winning you the game because of it. So next we have some of the best low-level monsters. So older school Yu-Gi-Oh, the monsters and kind of range of monsters of different cards isn't as big. And competitive Yu-Gi-Oh really does have quite a large range of different strategies and cards. So if it is just taking the time to learn newer strategies and how they work, and the more you play, the more of this kind of like database you'll build up, and it'll make it easier for you. In older school Yu-Gi-Oh, that's not really the case. There's a handful of good monsters early on, and the big thing is either does it have an effect, and is it high defense or high attack? So it's kind of how you're breaking these down. In this duel, we have Maneater Bug. When flipped face up, it destroys a monster. In this can either field. Giant Soldier of Stone, a good defense position monster with 2000 defense, and Lejin, the strongest attack position monster with 1800 attack. A couple things to notice with these monsters is Lejin is 1800 attack, the best defense position monster is 2000 defense. A normal summon monster, even with the best attack in the game, cannot get over a set monster. So high defense position monsters is a great way to stall out, because the only way your opponent will get rid of it is through being able to remove it with a card effect, Dark Hole or Raigeki, using Change Heart to steal it. And then next we have our tribute summons. So Summon Skull is the best tribute summon monster since it only takes one tribute and has 2500 attack. This is the same as Dark Magician. The monster requires 2 tributes. Blue Eyes White Dragon is stronger, but also requires 2 tributes. So I'm not saying Summon Skull is the best tribute summon monster ever made. It's in kind of the context of some of the earlier cards in the game, first few sets, Summon Skull is a better tribute summon because it has the same attack as Dark Magician, but requires 1 less tribute. So even though a lot of people might want to play Dark Magician or Blue Eyes because they're more iconic, unless you're really playing these in a devote strategy that you might see in more modern Yu-Gi-Oh, since they've gotten a lot of support and have their own kind of decks and strategies and cards. Just in this context, understanding that Summon Skull, does more or less what these cards do, but it's easier to get onto the field. This is really the one you're going to focus on. Good thing to really consider when looking at cards is, does something else do it? Do I have the means to get it? Sometimes the best cards in the game are more expensive, so you might need to look for a budget option that's not as strong, but it can still do the job for what you're trying to do. And how likely is this going to come up? You got to consider how long it takes to actually summon these monsters. A Dark Magician or Blue Eyes is going to take 3 turns before you contribute summon it. Do just normal summoning a monster, and then the following turn you could summon it. Or your opponent, if they're playing Summon Skull, they're going to be able to normal summon 1 monster, and then the following turn sacrifice that monster to tribute summon it. So it can be a really huge benefit to get to that play first and have the strongest monster on the field. But due to the fact that decks do have quite a bit of removal, you don't want to have too many high-level monsters, as it can clog your hand. Get so draws that you're going to get aren't as consistent if there's too many, and the person that can get to the strongest monster first, can have a really big benefit, moving forward into turns. Right, so that covers the important cards, how they kind of relate to the Mock Duel. Again, being able to use this thinking is going to be really big as you move forward into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Understanding the cards your opponent's using, and being able to go, okay, I think that's what that card is based off the cards this deck usually plays. It'll allow you to read and play around, those cards, and it's going to really increase your win rate when playing. If that was helpful, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I'll definitely try to get as many of the comments as possible. What you think. In the next section, what we're going to do is go over our Mock Duel. This is something I wanted to provide. I'm hoping this will be a pretty helpful part of the guide that will give you an example duel, 2 turns of Yugi versus Kaiba, 2 of the most prominent characters in the game, and how they think about the steps they're making in a competitive sense against one another, and actually seeing the plan they come up with based off the strategy and kind of reads they're making against each other, and how those strategies play out versus what actually happens, and how that affects the plays they make. Right, well, if that sounds interesting, I hope to see you guys in the next video, and I look forward to seeing you then.